So Rick, this is the Deep Dive's first time being live at a conference. We've been at conferences before. You've been asking us to come for a while now. We finally said we can't say no to Rick Rule. So here we are. What's the Rule Symposium about? What's the goal for all the people who are coming to attend this conference this week? What should they be looking to get out of it?
Well, I humbly suggest that you started at the top. We work very hard on this conference. Unlike most conferences, we charge the attendees to be here. If you go to a free conference, you need to understand that you're the product.
Yeah.
That's not it. Our loyalty is, of course, to the attendee. We have two kinds of attendees, too. The live attendees, which you'll see wandering around the conference, and over 1,000 people who are watching this online, which is one of the reasons why the marriage between ourselves and social media outlets like yourself is so important. But back to your question. First, we've stood the test of time. This conference has existed for more than 20 years with a core of attendees. You don't survive that long without doing things right. We've made the conference a little bit better every year. And if you make it a little bit better for 2 decades, it ends up being pretty good. How is it good? Great big picture thinkers, the Jim Rickards of the world, the Danielle DiMartino Booths of the world, the Nomi Prinz of the world, the Grant Williams of the world, people who tell you about the world the way it is, not the way CNBC wishes it were. And we go from there to analysts and portfolio managers who have made money in natural resources for 3 decades, not some failed investment banking hack who failed in crypto and failed in technology, just parachuted into mining so he could do no further damage. People who've made money for 30 years. Importantly, all of our exhibitors are vetted. If we don't own shares in public company exhibitors, they can't exhibit on our floor. At most conferences, the qualification to be an exhibitor is a check that cashes, and we're substantially more discriminating. Finally, of course, we have the living legends. We have, for over 20 years, featured a small group of individuals who have been serially successful, building multi-billion-dollar natural resource companies from scratch, teaching you how they did it, telling you what to look for, so that you have the ability, from the voices of the people who made a difference, how to find a $5 million market cap that's going to become a $5 billion market cap.
Something I've thought about when I look at some of the names that have had success in mining, I think a lot about Great Bear, because there's not too many examples like that where they effectively went public, started hitting drill holes that were, bonanza, and stock basically went like that, taken out. When I go to Great Bear's YouTube page, I always find this fascinating. They were putting out great videos explaining their discovery, and you can go to it to this day, and a lot of those videos have like 150, 200 views. And from my viewpoint, one of the things that happened with Great Bear was that a lot of the people who ended up making money in that were already wealthy mining investors who were astute enough to know that they had a great discovery, and there wasn't nearly enough noise just in that story to get more retail investors excited. Do you think that there is a bit of an onus on companies with great discoveries to just get out there and sort of wave their arms and say, look at me?
It seems, as a broad generality, that people who are technically very good are narrative incompetent. And it would seem that the mining business is polluted by a whole bunch of people who are great at narrative, but can't do anything else. The veteran mining investors, people like myself, have known the Discovery Group for 2 decades. So they paid attention to their press releases where, pardon my elitist subtext, but the great unwashed, the people who don't know very much about mining, didn't know how to segregate between people who in the press release told the truth and the rest of them. What I think needs to happen is really investor education, so that more investors focus on the serially successful human beings, and that more investors have enough education at conferences like these so that they understand how to interpret the press releases. Many investors, first time through, look at so many meters of thus and such a grade, and they don't have the education to know, is that good? Is that not good? Does it matter in context? How does the drill hole fit into the plan view? At Rule Investment Media and the Rule Classroom, We have a couple hundred hours of free online instruction to tell people how to do just that, and a lot more of that needs to be done.
I got a friend who's a former banker, and now he kind of plays more like a retail investor. He buys stock open market, and he's got a network of people he talks to, obviously. And one thing he was saying to me is, in this market where we're not seeing crazy amounts of capital flow into junior mining, it's really important for a story or a name that he's going to go and buy shares in, that it has to have deep pockets behind it, so that if they get those results that merit more exploration, they actually have the money to do it. Whereas if you're in one of those names that's maybe ran by one of those sort of serial entrepreneurs that, they're doing crypto, they're doing tech, they're doing cannabis, they're doing psychedelics, they're doing whatever, they may go hit some holes that are very interesting from a geology perspective, but they've ran out of room in terms of their ability to raise money. How important is it for you before you put money into a name that they have that sort of capital markets ability, that if they hit something that's interesting, that they're able to keep going?
I'm lucky enough to have been in the business long enough that I have a fair bit of money myself.
So you can just do it yourself?
I can do it myself, but I don't. I like to have partners in deals. And the nature of a partner is that he or she will call me up when they see something interesting, and I'll call somebody else. And these networks are sort of spontaneously forming. What you'll find is that the group of people who already have credibility in this business and have good results have no shortage of capital. It's just that population as a percentage of the whole is very small. I've probably participated in 30 financings in the last 2 years, I'm guessing, maybe 35. And at least 80% of them have been oversubscribed, which is to say that they raised, or they were able to raise, more money than they went out for. And I was cut back on my allocation. So I hear the industry as a whole saying it's underfunded, and I find myself getting cut back on financings. And I wonder about the congruity, if you will, between those two statements. What it is that the truly deserving people and truly deserving projects are always well funded. If you go back to Discovery Group, even in the beginning of that successful effort, they didn't have a problem finding money because they'd been raising exploration syndicates for 30 years, and they were already well-heeled themselves.
I went back and looked at all their news releases, just sort of as a exercise to sort of see, okay, what's a case study for a successful company? And I think that they bought the first 50% of the Dixie Lake project for like $100,000, and then they got the rest of it for like 120 or something like that. So off the top of my head, somewhere in that ballpark.
Understand, until you put a drill hole in it's mosquito pasture. It's nothing. These people had the intelligence to know that it was mosquito pasture in a very, very, very good neighborhood. And that underneath that swamp, there were some indications of mineralization. But what was important to an early stage investor like myself wasn't the mosquito pasture, but rather the person telling me the story about the mosquito pasture. People who were good explorationists that had been serially successful before, people that had had the opportunity to lie to me but didn't take that opportunity, told me the truth.
Victoria Gold, I got to get your thoughts on that. I heard some mumblings that there were people who kind of knew that there were problems there. I don't know if you heard any of that. Were you invested?
I was not. I was invested in that project probably 30 years ago when Clive Johnson had it in the original Victoria. And to me, it was too low grade, it was too discontinuous, it was too remote. It finally got put into production basically when the creditors foreclosed and put the money in to put it in production themselves. So I haven't been involved for 25 years. There are suggestions that there was a fairly obvious ground control issue. I don't know whether that's true or not. It's tragic what happened. That part is tragic, and I guess they've had a second failure now. So it's an ongoing tragedy that'll need to be dealt with. Unfortunately, Victoria, even with the cash in the till and the cash bond, likely doesn't have enough money to survive the remediation and the rebuild. So there's going to have to be a restructuring there. I think it will also probably change the duration involved in the permitting regime in the Yukon.
Something I like to ask when I go to conferences like this that I think is a really relevant question. what are people talking about? So when somebody's going around and they're just having conversations with other investors or bankers, deal guys, whoever, what's the story? And for example, at DRIC, I was asking that, and I asked some of the more astute mining people that I knew, and the first answer I'd get was Snowline Gold. And sure enough, they just announced a 7 million ounce maiden resource.
Yep.
What do you think is going to be the talk at this conference?
At this conference, what you're going to have is people who are real veteran speculators. So there isn't going to be one subject. Vancouver is, of course, Western Canadian centric.
Yeah.
So the fact that Snowline, first of all, was local boys,
Yeah.
that it was exploration, and that it was in Western Canada was important. It may be that as a consequence of the fact that most of the attendees here come through the Rule classroom, my suggestion is that the conference will much more likely be about what's not in favor rather than in favor.
Yeah.
I've been trying to teach for 30 years that, as Gretzky says, you don't skate to where the puck is, you skate to where the puck is gonna be.
Yeah.
You gotta be a contrarian or you gotta be a victim. So I think part of the discussion is gonna be around what's really cheap. I hope the discussion too is around materiality. Too many people chase junk deposits, little deposits. Small deposits can only make you small money, but they come with big risks. Big deposits have big risks, but they can make you big money. So I'm hoping that a lot of the discussion is around the true tier one indicated discoveries, the discoveries with 10 to 20 billion dollars worth of in situ recoverable reserves and resources, irrespective of whether the commodity's in favor or not. I'm hoping that it'll be around materiality.
What's the commodity that you're seeing the most excitement around right now when you're talking with investors or people that are interested in deploying capital?
Unfortunately, for me, it's uranium. I was very aggressive talking to people about uranium when nobody cared. This conference 3 years ago, when the uranium price was at $20, was mostly about uranium. We did a deep dive uranium boot camp at $20. It's interesting that the narrative that we told people then becomes believable after uranium's already gone from $20 to $80. My life for 30 years has been trying to teach people to buy stuff when it has to go up, not after it has gone up. I very recently had said that the thing that seemed to have disappointed speculators the most, and hence was out of favor, was silver. But now silver is no longer quite as out of favor. That narrative made sense at $22 silver. It makes less sense at $31 silver. I think it's going high, but the fact is it's not hated anymore.
Yeah, we notice that because we have a platform, TheDeepDive.Ca. We also own the .com. We use the .ca because we're proudly Canadian. And when we look at our data for what we're covering and what's getting organic eyeballs, it's silver right now. And a lot of these small silver producers at $20 an ounce, just having conversations with them, they look like they were going to take a toaster bath. And we talked to them at $30, $32 an ounce silver, and they're on top of the world. And we just noticed that just the data that we're seeing, retail interest seems to be heavy in silver right now.
I've always been anti-data in the sense that, not that I don't use data, I use it a lot, but I try to use it as a contrary indicator. When I still ran my own proprietary brokerage firm, when 80% of the tickets on a daily basis were buy tickets, I made myself sell something. When 80% of the tickets were sell tickets, I tried to buy something. I've learned in this business, you're either a contrarian or you're going to be a victim. And I've learned to love hate. What has disappointed people? What has bored people? What are people angry about? That's where I want to buy. What do they love? What makes sense? What has no objection to the story? That's what I want to sell.
That makes a lot of sense. Buy stuff when it's cheap, sell it when it's worth a lot. A lot more. There's some news out of Canada. I know that we're here in Florida and beautiful state. We went out and hit the town in actually St. Petersburg last night. And but I got to ask you a Canadian-related question that just happened last week. I don't know if you saw this, but our great Minister of Industry, Francois Philippe Champagne, I believe it is, they announced a directive on Thursday that they are going to heavily scrutinize any acquisitions that happen from foreign investment. And it seems like this government is hell-bent on doing whatever they can to prevent capital from flowing into the space, which nobody seemed to have a problem with when there was money laundering happening in real estate that's made it so that no young people can afford a house now. But when it happens to an industry that creates jobs and is productive for the economy, they seem to have a problem with it. What's your take on it?
I think it's fair to say that your current government is hostile to extractive industries. The idea, as an example, that your prime minister couldn't find a business case for Canadian natural gas when all of his major business partners, the people who would be buying the gas, could, is instructive. Clearly, in some senses, I mean, there is obviously an overriding narrative, with your government in mind, by the way, that is, for want of a better phrase, woke. The difference is that the Canadian economy is completely resource-centric. The thing that you do better than any other country around the world is extractive industries and extractive industry service. And the idea that because of some form of political correctness, at least your federal government is opposed to the one industry where Canadians are world leaders. I don't just mean in terms of mining in Canada. Mining is financed and organized around the world in Canada. Canadian oil and gas technology is as good as any technology in the world, as good as American technology with 10% of the people. I would have expected, if the Prime Minister was interested in the prosperity of Canada, that he would have emphasized those industries where Canada was already a world leader.
It's very frustrating to sort of see what's happened. But I had one friend who said the line to me the other day, goes, under this government, it's going to be half the people work for the government, and they are going to make more money than the other half we're supposed to pay for them. And it logically makes no sense. And from my view, what's going to happen here with the Canadian economy is we've created so many problems that when the Canadian dollar starts to sink and interest rates have to remain somewhat high to battle inflation, the only way out of it is going to have to be a government that's going to come in and really want to take advantage of the resources that we have.
I'm reminded by what Churchill said about the Americans, which is to say that Americans always did the right thing when there was no other choice. I remember back to the first Trudeau, and I remember the fiscal wreck that existed in Canada after he was gone. It's amazing that his second in command, his henchman, what was his name? God, the name escapes me all of a sudden, but it doesn't matter. Help came from a fairly improbable source. He didn't reform Canada fiscally because that's what he wanted to do. He did it because he had no second choice. And I suspect that exactly what you're saying is going to occur. You know, I mean, there was basically, after Trudeau, there was a failed provincial bond offering. In other words, they came with a bond issuance and nobody showed up. Canada was really, truly threatened with being shut out of global. By the way, the guy's name was Chrétien, Jean Chrétien. Canada was in some danger of being frozen out of global credit markets. And so, against all odds, for a little while at least, they did the right thing.
Rick, when we look around what's happening in the world, it looks like a lot of countries are now turning to more, we'll say, right-leaning governments, capitalist. Do you think that this trend is going to continue, and what do you think it means for the global economy?
I don't. I think what you're seeing is that working people are increasingly frustrated with global elites. And I think what you're seeing, as an example, in places like France, aren't necessarily pro-capitalist as much as they are anti-estate that doesn't work for them. The exception, of course, would be Argentina, which has undergone really, truly profound political change. Whether or not that can continue, given the fact that the government there is effectively broke, whether or not the Argentine people are willing to suffer through 2 or 3 years of pain which is what it would take to get that economy on the right foot, is a different circumstance. But the rightist trend, the alleged rightist trend that you're seeing around the world, I think really is a reaction of working people to the elites getting the communal benefits rather than them. I think what you'll find is that they want the benefits. They don't want to leave them with the people who paid for them, sadly. I wish I didn't have to say that.
Well, Rick, thanks very much for doing this. We appreciate you hosting the Deep Dive at your symposium. And if our audience wants to see some of the footage that's happening at the event, where can they go to?
I invite your audience to go to ruleinvestmentmedia.com. I would tell them too that they can participate indirectly. If they go to ruleinvestmentmedia.com, list their natural resource stocks, I'll personally rank them 1 to 10, 1 being best, 10 being worst. I'll make comments on individual issues if those comments I think have any value. The other thing is that the pre-conference interviews of every CEO at the conference are posted as freeware at Rule Investment Media. Further, there's 200 hours of free instructional programming on how to evaluate mining and oil and gas investments, at the Rule Classroom.
Well, Rick, thanks very much for doing this, and we look forward to a fun week.
Pleasure. Thank you for coming down.